Hey, what's up, guys? We're continuing our series through Matthew, and Matthew 14 actually is a chapter that is pretty action packed. I mean, we've seen John the Baptist be beheaded, we've seen Jesus go and he's fed the 5,000, and now we see him walking on the water in the middle of a storm. And Jesus, in all of this, you really see how Jesus handles crises, handles things that hurt, that are real close to him, and hard to hear. And what he does is he first and foremost goes into prayer. He wants to be with the Father. He wants to be communicating with God constantly, and especially when it's a time of need. Then we see him and he has compassion on those that are around him. He looks to truly serve as not just a king ruling, right? But he looks to serve as a king who is taking care of his people and taking care of the needs that they have first and foremost above his own desires, right? And so we see him, he left to be alone, right? He left to go and be alone, be in prayer when he heard that John the Baptist was beheaded. And then the crowds followed him. He even got in a boat and left, right? But they followed him on foot, found where he was at, and then he turned and he fed the 5,000. Then right after this, it says, immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into a boat and go before him to the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. Now when evening came, he was alone there, but the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. Now in the fourth watch of the night, which was about 3 a.m., it says, Jesus went to them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, "It is a ghost." And they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid." And Peter answered him and said, "Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water." So he came, and when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those who were in the boat came and worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." When they had crossed over, they came to the land of Gennesaret. And when the men of that place recognized him, they sent out into all that surrounding region, and brought to him all who were sick, and begged him that they might only touch the hem of his garment, and as many touched it were made perfectly well. Right. So at the end of the feast, at the end of the last video, Jesus fed the 5,000, and then what happened? They collected all of the fragments of what remained, and they had 12 baskets full. Right? 12 baskets full. Each disciple had an entire basket full of the bread and the fish that was once just a piece that they had given out to the other people. Think about that for a second. There was one person, one little boy. They came with a basket of 5 loaves and 2 fish, and he gave it to Jesus. And what Jesus does is he takes that, he blesses it, and he gives it in multitudes. He gives a little bit to the disciples, right? Just a little bit. And they take it and they feed the 5,000. And then in the end of feeding, the end of taking that little bit that Jesus gave them, of taking that little bit that God gives you and giving it to the multitudes, what comes back is a basket full, more than they could eat on their own, more than they could even think of eating, right? This blessing came back to them in abundance, like multifold from what they had given, and Jesus sends them out. There's 3 things that it says Jesus does immediately in this passage. It says immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side. Right? Now this isn't a boat of just the disciples. There's other people in it. Right? We know that from the end. This is people leaving, and Jesus immediately gets him to go because he wants to be alone in prayer. He wants to go talk to God. And that's what he does. After he sends them away, he goes up on the mountain so he can pray and he can talk to God. The thing that he's been longing for this whole chapter, right? He's finally coming around to it. Next it says, he immediately spoke to them saying, "Be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid." Right? When he saw that they were scared, they thought he was a ghost on the water. He's calling out to them, immediately calling out to them. And then third, it says, and immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" When Peter was sinking in the water. And guys, there's three things that Jesus will always do for you, right? There's three things that he's called you to do. There's three things that we see in your life, right? He will always send you. He will always prepare you, bless you, give you what you need, and send you to go where you need to go. The second thing he'll always do is that he will always, always comfort you. If you cry out, you're scared, you don't know what to do, you think it's too much, he will always comfort you and say, "Be of good cheer. It's me. Don't be afraid. I'm here." And the third thing that he'll always do is he'll always save you. If you step out, right? Jesus walked on water, but so did Peter. He did it for just a second. He did it because he believed. He said, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to walk." And he steps out and walks as well. But then looking around, he sees the wind and everything that's going on, and he gets scared and he starts to doubt, even though he's already done it. And what happens is immediately Jesus reaches out his hand and grabbed him. He will always, guys, always send you, comfort you, and save you. That's Jesus. And at the end of this, I want to point this out because sometimes there's little treasures that are put in these chapters, right? Right here at the end when it says, when they had crossed over, they came to the land of Gennesaret. And see, Gennesaret is the meaning of that is that it's a garden of treasures, right? Or the garden of the prince. Right? This is where they came to land. And it's in the land of Naphtali. It used to be called Siserath, I believe is how it's called in Joshua. But it's in the land of Naphtali, in that region. It's like the northwest Sea of Galilee. But they landed there at the Garden of the Prince. And what happens at the Garden of the Prince? Is it, well, the men of that place recognized him. And they sent out into all of the surrounding region and brought everybody that was sick and begged that they might just touch the hem of his garment. They might just touch the edge of his robe. And as many that did it were healed. As many that did it were made perfectly well. Right? Now this is in contrast to, remember there was another land where there was a demon-possessed man or two demon-possessed people that stayed in the caves and the tunnels and nobody could go around them. And Jesus cast the demon out and then the people begged him to leave. But not in the Garden of the Prince. Not in this place where Jesus has landed, where they recognize who he is, right? And they come to him. They beg just to be close to him. And guys, I think that's what it's like with us as Christians, right? We're in the Garden of the Prince. And by the way, it's called that, right? Because it's situated between kind of two hills, right? And the water runs off of these hills and it comes down to these great like plains that are in the middle. And everything that is there is very fertile. It produces great crop. Things grow in just in abundance in this region, right? And it's so much so that it was named the Garden of the Prince, the Garden of Treasures, right? So it's this land where everything grows in abundance. Everything grows in like paradise. And so when Jesus comes, right, and when we see Jesus, sorry, when we see Jesus in paradise, we would beg, we would long just to be with him, just to be close enough to touch him. And when you do that, and when you come to him, you're made perfectly well. But this is, this little treasure is, the name is really cool. And it's cool to understand that and what the region looked like and this sort of stuff. But it goes so deep into it, even back to the original blessing of Naphtali, right? Where it was Deuteronomy 33, where it said the blessing of Naphtali was it satisfied with favor and full of the blessings of the Lord. Take possession of the sea in the south. So, satisfied with favor and full of the blessings, you have the garden of the prince and this region, Gennesaret. Right? And when the prince arrives, any who touch just the hem of his garment are made perfectly well. And it's just let that sink in and just kind of savor that for a minute. Just how deep those roots go from where we're seeing Jesus here all the way to Naphtali, or all the way to Deuteronomy. You see the blessings. You see the same blessing, right? And you see it come to fruition. I love reading the Word of God. I really do, because sometimes things like this are just you can just soak it up and just enjoy it.